On a crucial morning when I had a major presentation involving a massive deal worth $5 billion, I arrived at the venue just in the nick of time after helping a pregnant woman who had collapsed at the station. At the venue, a coworker who always viewed me as a rival had already finished distributing the materials and was taking credit for it. The next day, I was summoned by the company president and handed a pink slip.
What's the meaning of being late for such an important presentation? You claim you helped a pregnant woman and that's why you were delayed. Stop lying.
I'm not lying. As I tried to defend myself, my coworker chimed in.
Well, boss, this guy always makes excuses to get out of work. This time, I happened to cover for him, but it could have caused significant damage to the company, you know.
That's right. I hate liars the most. We don't need people like you in our company. You're fired. Fired.
My coworker smirked beside me. Indeed, I was at fault for being late. It was such a cruel decision to get fired without any investigation, but those who had belittled me didn't know. This was the countdown to their downfall. My name is John Smith. I work at a startup company in the city. Although it's a startup, the company already has a reputation, and it's a grateful company that recognizes performance as long as you have the motivation and skills, even for someone like me who only graduated from high school. The workload is heavy, but I lead a reasonably fulfilling life. Today, to celebrate the successful presentation of my team, I came to a familiar Western-style bar with my coworkers, Mike, Sarah, and others. This restaurant, located a little off the main street, is called Four Seasons, and it literally offers delicious meals according to the seasons. The proprietress, Emily, is a young, beautiful woman who looks great in dresses and has a good reputation among customers. Of course, the food here is fantastic, and I absolutely love the chili beans at this bar. It's like the taste of my mother's cooking from the past, and no matter how tired I am from work, just having a drink at this restaurant makes my fatigue disappear.
Oh, John, it's rare to see you here. Are you here with your coworkers today?
Yes, today our work went well, so I thought I'd like to have some delicious food to celebrate.
Well, I'm delighted. Then, I must express my gratitude for your continued patronage.
Thank you as always. Emily smiled gently and offered a glass of water. Then, Sarah sighed softly as she looked at the proprietress.
The proprietress here is really beautiful, isn't she? How should I put it? She has that mature charm, right? Men must like the type of woman like the proprietress, right?
Oh, thank you so much. If a young girl like you compliments me, I'm happy even if it's just flattery. Would you like something extra as a token of appreciation?
Saying that, Emily handed over a small dish.
Here you go. It's free.
Oh, it looks delicious.
Watching the exchange between the two women, I took a sip of my beer with a smile. Suddenly, Sarah asked, "John, do you also like women like the proprietress?" I cleared my throat slightly and replied, "Well, I don't think they's a man who dislikes women like the proprietress, right?" In response, Sarah, with a displeased look on her face, poured more beer into my glass.
Oh well, I'm just a young'un with no special talents, after all.
Oh, come on, aren't you already drunk without even drinking?
I'll drink more. I'll drink as much as I want.
After that, Sarah continued to interact with me in various ways, but one person who seemed unimpressed with it all was a male colleague named Mike. Mike graduated from a well-known university, and when we first joined the company, we worked well together. However, as soon as he found out I was a high school graduate, his attitude completely changed. He would delegate all the tedious work, like data collection and analysis, to me, while taking credit for the easy tasks.
Hey, John, I'll need those documents by tomorrow.
By tomorrow. I haven't even finished the ones you asked for yesterday.
Oh, come on. If you're a high school graduate who worked your way up, you've got the determination, right? Your only strength must be your physical stamina.
He made such sarcastic remarks and pushed more work onto me. Sarah, my coworker, didn't seem to like Mike's approach, and he often complained.
Geez, he never does any of the hard work himself and just pushes everything onto John. Even though we're at the same level, he acts like he's superior. I'm sure he's just jealous because everyone at work likes John.
Sarah, don't say that. I'll do my best in the areas where I can contribute.
Oh, John is just too kind. Anyway, be careful not to overdo it. You might collapse if you push yourself too hard.
Oh, thank you. I stayed late that day, too, and finished all the work assigned by Mike. I know Mike looks down on me for being a high school graduate, but I don't feel any shame about my education. That's because I chose to stop pursuing a college degree. My mom used to run a children's cafeteria in a separate building at home, providing free meals to children who couldn't eat properly. She was what you might call an interfering and big-hearted mother. After work, my dad would rush to the store to buy groceries, and I had been helping out since I was a child. Children with various circumstances would come to the children's cafeteria. Among them, there were siblings named Em and Jin, who often visited. Em's family was a single-parent household, and her mom worked multiple part-time jobs. For dinner, Em and her little brother Jin would split a hot dog in half and share it. Em and Jin always looked so skinny. I remember when my mom, out of concern, brought them to our cafeteria for the first time.
Children need to eat a lot, play energetically, and sleep well. That's their job, right?
My mom said with a hearty laugh as she served them a mountain of chili beans. It had been a while since they had eaten such warm food, so they kept saying how delicious it was and stuffed their mouths with rice. After that, the two of them started coming to our cafeteria every day, and we became as close as siblings. I wonder what Em and Jin are doing now. Are they doing well? I sometimes think about everyone as if they were real siblings. The children's cafeteria receives some donations as an NPO, but most of the expenses are covered by the management. My grandparents used to have a hobby of farming, so we often directly sourced ingredients from the farm. For me, an only child, it felt like having many little companions. Watching the young siblings enjoy their mother's cooking with smiles on their faces, even though they had been thin, made me happy. Amidst such a life, when I was in high school, my dad passed away due to illness. My mom considered closing the children's cafeteria, but I didn't want her to. So I gave up on going to college and started working. In the end, a few years later, my mother also followed my father, and the cafeteria had to be closed. However, I don't regret my choice. I love the smile on my mother's face when she ran the cafeteria. Even now, I occasionally reminisce about the mother who cooked happily and the children who ate her food with delight. I heard that the siblings were taken in by distant relatives. Lately, I've been wondering how they're doing now, and I find myself immersed in those thoughts more often. Mike emphasizes my lack of formal education, but I believe that having the ability to perform well at work is more important than education. So, I decided to work hard without worrying about how much he mocks me. Since I finished the data analysis assigned by Mike quickly, I started preparing materials for tomorrow's planning meeting. In that meeting, our company will decide where to focus its efforts for a new genre of products, which will involve developing new business partners. In the end, during the meeting, we decided to handle products with a high sales rate, considering cost effectiveness. After that meeting, I was summoned by the manager.
John, I'm thinking of interesting you with the presentation for the new product this time. It's about expanding to new business partners, so stay sharp. If it succeeds, it could be a deal worth at least $5 billion.
Thank you very much, but $5 billion, it's a huge responsibility. As I pondered the weight of this significant task, Mike, who had attended the meeting with me, spoke up to the manager.
Boss, why would you entrust such a big task to someone like John, who lacks a formal education? Isn't this the perfect opportunity for me?
Mike made a self-promotion while belittling me a bit, and the department head raised an eyebrow.
Well, this project will involve a large number of young people. In cases like this, it's better to have someone like John, who is trusted by those below him, to lead. Mike, I'd like you to cooperate with him.
I see. I got it.
Clearly dissatisfied, Mile didn't press the issue further, and we began preparing for the new presentation together.
John, let's make sure it's a success, okay?
Yeah, let's do our best together. As I started working with my coworkers on the preparations, Mike, who had initially been in cooperative, eventually began to assist with tasks like creating documents without me even asking.
Hey, John. Is it okay to insert this data on page 6?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. At first, both Sarah and I were suspicious of Mike silently assisting us without any complaints or sarcasm. However, due to his uncharacteristic cooperation, we gradually let our guard down, thinking he might have had a change of heart. Little did we know that this was a massive trap. Even though our team worked overtime together, we managed to create a superb presentation material through collaboration. With confidence that this would undoubtedly lead to success, we eagerly awaited the day of the presentation. On the morning of the presentation day, I woke up earlier than usual to ensure I wouldn't be late as I was heading to the other company's office. However, it's precisely at times like these when troubles tend to occur. While heading to the station, I saw a pregnant woman with a large belly crouching down, holding her abdomen. She looked as if she were in pain, with sweat on her forehead. Although passers-by glanced at her due to it being rush hour, no one said a word. Unable to ignore it, I rushed over and spoke to the woman. "Are you okay?" The woman, upon hearing my voice, slowly raised her head and said with a teary voice,
My stomach hurts.
"Could it be contractions?"
Yes.
She nodded, her face contorted in pain. It seemed there was a nearby clinic where she usually received care. Despite still having some time before her due date, contractions had suddenly started. I quickly hailed a taxi and took her to the hospital. Soon after arriving at the hospital, one of her relatives rushed over. I wished her well and hurried to the presentation venue. Upon arriving at the presentation venue just before it started, I apologized to my team members. Looking around the room, I noticed that Mike had already distributed the materials. Sorry, Mike, you saved me.
What are you talking about? We're a team. Now, hurry up and prepare for the presentation.
Thank you. I rushed to prepare, and we managed to start the presentation right on time. However, as I progressed with the presentation, a murmur of unease began to spread through the room. Soon after, someone from the client's company expressed their displeasure.
Hey, the presentation materials and the projector's visuals don't match. What's going on? The data in the materials is completely different from the estimates. Are you even organizing your data properly? Presenting with such sloppy data is an insult to our company as well. What are you thinking?
As I questioned the heckling coming one after another, I checked the materials in my hands. To my surprise, the materials prepared by me were completely different from what was there. Huh, what does this mean? Beside me, Mike smirked softly. Then he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the earlier mistake in the materials I handed out." He distributed the correct materials that I had prepared in advance. Mike looked at me with a mocking smile and took the microphone, saying, "From this point on, I'll be responsible for the explanation." It was a $5 billion deal, and I had to leave the stage with a bitter feeling, making sure not to spoil the atmosphere. Mike's explanation was exactly the same as the script I had prepared. I've been had. I clenched my fist with frustration. Mike probably had this planned from the beginning. He wanted to give the impression to the higher-ups that I was incapable and that he was more competent than me. Although the presentation itself ended successfully, thanks to Mike, my standing in the company had reached its lowest point. The guy who not only arrived late, but also messed up the presentation materials is unbelievable. That's my current evaluation. The next day, the president came to my department and gave me a stern reprimand.
What on earth were you thinking? When you showed up at the presentation venue at the last minute, you presented with the wrong materials. You're bringing disgrace to our company. What were you thinking?
I'm really sorry. After sincerely apologizing, I explained that I had been late for the presentation due to helping a pregnant woman in the morning, and that the presentation materials had turned out to be different from what I had prepared. However, it was at that moment that Mike intervened.
Boss, what John is saying is completely nonsense. This guy is all talk, always trying to manipulate everyone like this. Even the success of the previous presentation, the department had attributed it to John, but it was me who did all the data analysis. As for this issue with the materials, when I asked him if he was sure, he said yes. Based on my experience, I had a feeling that the data might be wrong, so I had prepared different materials just in case. Fortunately, they came in handy.
Everything Mike was saying was pure fabrication. However, in the current situation, I knew that no matter what I said, the president wouldn't believe me. I clenched my teeth and swallowed my frustration.
Is that so? You're Mike, right? I heard you graduated from a prestigious university with outstanding grades. Well, it seems that your education wasn't in vain. Well done. If, by any chance, this deal hadn't gone well, our company would have suffered a significant blow.
No, it's nothing. I just did what I had to do.
I see. That humble attitude is commendable. But I've heard that John is considered a promising talent by the department head. I'm disappointed. And personally, I hate liars the most. Someone who is late for an important business deal and tells lies is not needed in this company. John, you are fired. Fired.
What? I was taken aback by the sudden announcement of my dismissal. Then Sarah, who had been listening to our conversation behind me, tried to speak up to defend me.
Boss, if I may.
Sarah, it's okay.
But
The president, who had been listening to our exchange, gave Sarah a stern look.
Oh, so you're John's coworker. To question my decision like this. Did he teach you not to follow the company's rules? It seems that high school graduates like you haven't been properly educated about societal rules.
I realized that if I said more, it would only worsen her situation. So, I instinctively spoke up to defend her. Boss, as you say, this mistake is entirely my responsibility. She didn't know the circumstances. I apologize.
I see. If you understand, submit your resignation letter promptly and leave.
Yes, got it. As the president left the room, Mike, who had been waiting behind me, spoke up.
I guess people without education can't do anything right. Checking the materials before distribution is the basics of the basics.
What the heck?
Also, don't trust people blindly. And it's not a good idea to try to please everyone. It only leads to losses. Sarah, you have such a poor coworker. If she had joined my team from the beginning, I would have taken good care of her.
no, I'd rather not receive any special treatment from someone who resorts to such dirty tricks.
Is that so? You'll regret it later.
I realized that this was Mike's true nature. I had always suspected that he looked down on me for being a high school graduate, but I never thought he would go to such lengths to undermine me. I would have done anything, whether it was data organization or analysis, if he had asked. Why did I have to be resented like this? The more I thought about it, the emptier I felt. The younger coworkers, including Sarah, were against my resignation, given what Mike had done and the president's decision. However, in our company, the president's orders were absolute. Unless there was a compelling reason, there was no way to overturn a resignation. I calmed everyone down and decided to use up the accumulated paid leave from the next day. I had been with the company for a long time, but once my paid leave was over, it would be time to say goodbye. That night, I stopped by the familiar small bar called Four Seasons. Tears welled up in my eyes as I was greeted by Emily with her usual gentle smile. She looked surprised to see me like that, but I think she sensed that there was a reason behind it.
Here, today I'll treat you, okay? Drink to your heart's content and forget about your troubles.
She said that. Emily, I got fired from the company.
Oh my, well, but it must be for a good reason, right, John?
Yay, well, do you remember that coworker, Mike, who came here with me the other day?
Oh yes, I remember.
He got me good. I told her about how I had encountered the pregnant woman in labor that morning, how I had taken her to the hospital, and how I had fallen into Mike's trap.
I see. But John helped a pregnant woman and her child, right? Isn't that amazing? To take the right course of action as a human being. It's a dark future for a company that fires someone like that. On the contrary, maybe it's a good thing you left early.
Do you think so?
Yes, John, I'm sure you'll find a new job quickly.
Emily, thank you, but I might be unemployed for a while, so I won't be able to come here.
Oh, don't say that. If it's you, John, you're always welcome here. In fact, I'd even treat you for free.
That's funny, Emily, that's a bit too much. But I appreciate your kindness. Thank you.
It's okay. I'm sure good things will come your way. My instincts are surprisingly accurate.
Emily's smile made me feel warm. Then, about 2 weeks later, my home intercom rang. I couldn't think of anyone who would visit my house other than a delivery person, so I went to the door. To my surprise, Emily was there. Emily, what brings you here?
John, long time no see. Are you doing well? Actually, someone really wanted to meet you, so I got the address from Sarah and brought that person here.
Huh? Someone who wants to meet me?
Yes, this is Olivia Davis. She's the one you helped 2 weeks ago.
Oh, the one from that time. Are you okay now?
Yes, thanks to you, I was saved that day. My child was born healthy as well. It's all thanks to you. I'm really grateful.
Saying that, Olivia held my hands. I see. I'm glad your baby was born safely. When I responded, her expression suddenly darkened.
But I heard that you lost your job because you helped me. What a terrible company, questioning their president's judgment.
Well, it's all in the past, Olivia. You don't need to worry about it.
No, I can't let it go. The person who saved my life and my child's life is facing such an unfair situation. I can't just stand by and do nothing. Can you tell me more about it?
In response to her strong request, I explained everything that had happened up until that point. Now that I thought about it, it had been a while since I had talked to so many people recently.
In that case, John, I think I can help too.
Really? I actually came across an interesting idea. So, if we're going to get back at them, I have a good plan in mind.
What do you mean? After that, we discussed various things about the future.
By the way, John, have you been eating properly lately?
With that, Emily offered me a lunch box filled with fried chicken and hamburgers that are often served at small bar.
People need to eat well, or they won't have the energy for what lies ahead, you know? So, eat up and prepare yourself for the future.
Emily, thank you.
You're welcome. By the way, John, I heard that you gave my restaurant's business card to Olivia when she asked for your contact information at the hospital.
Oh, that's why Emily came to my house with Olivia.
Yes, that's right. You're surprisingly absent-minded, aren't you?
Sorry. I laughed it off, but the truth was, I felt so embarrassed that my face turned red. The fact was, I was a fan of the Four Seasons and Emily, both in name and reality. I had been carrying the Four Seasons business card as a kind of talisman with me all the time. In my hurry to get to the presentation and worried about being late, I had accidentally handed the Four Seasons business card to Olivia when she asked for my contact information. I realized that the reason I couldn't find that business card after being fired from my job was that I had given it to Olivia by mistake. However, as a result, I gained strong allies in Olivia and Emily. Sometimes, things work out for the best. Oh, Olivia, do you still have that business card with you?
Yes, look, I've been carrying it with me carefully.
Could you exchange it with my business card?
What is that?
When Emily asked, I stammered but gave an honest answer about my feelings. I really love your bar, Emily. No matter how tired I am, the moment I step into your place, I feel refreshed. So, your business card is like my mental stabilizer or charm.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that.
In response, Emily blushed with a smile.
Then until John joins the new company and comes over here confidently, I'll deliver our meals for you.
Huh?
Oh my, John, you can't refuse an offer from a woman you know.
Olivia gave me a lukewarm look and scolded me. Blushing, I thanked Emily. On my last day off, I went to the office. Then, the manager hurriedly called me over.
Hey, John and Mike, and those who were involved in the presentation the other day, come to the president's office quickly.
Huh?
Mike seemed puzzled as to why he was called, but I somehow felt like I could see the future where this would all be resolved.
Well, it might be nice to see you scolded by the president for the last time.
Mike grinned defiantly, and in my mind, I stuck out my tongue at him. When we went to the president's office, there were a pale-faced president and the president of our business partner.
John, about your resignation, I want you to forget it.
The president told me first. Boss, what happened all of a sudden? Today is my last day at this company.
No, it's about the $5 billion deal we made the other day. The president of the other party really wants you to be in charge. If you don't take charge, he says he'll cancel the deal.
The president stammered with his excuses, and Mike quickly retorted,
Boss, what are you saying? You said we don't need a liar like him in our company. What happened to leaving the responsibility for this deal to me?
You, shut up. This is not the time for that.
Then, the president's business partner, who had been listening to the conversation on the other side, spoke up.
Why you call John a liar?
Because he's saying that because the other day, during the presentation, he lied about you helping a pregnant woman and being late for the presentation, right?
Oh, John, was it a lie that the reason for your lateness was helping someone in labor?
No, it's true. I was late to the presentation because I couldn't move due to the start of labor pains, so I took a taxi to the regular hospital.
I see. So, what kind of woman did you help?
Yes, she was a woman in her 20s named Olivia Davis. She said the baby was born safely, so she came to my house the other day to thank me.
I see. My granddaughter was just born the other day too. It's quite a coincidence. Besides, my daughter also had labor pains suddenly at the station and was taken to the hospital by a kind man. His name was John Smith, right?
Huh?
The business partner's president laughed joyfully as if he had successfully played a prank.
Well, Davis, does this mean that John saved your daughter?
Yes, that's right. The person who saved my precious daughter and grandson from being called a liar and losing his job can't be helped, so I can't stay silent.
Then Mike said with a bitter face,
Still, even if that's the case, isn't it entirely personal to say that he should be in charge? He's a good-for-nothing who made a mistake with the presentation materials. Shouldn't we consider helping people and work abilities separately?
Oh, really? Do you think he's a good for nothing?
Yes, that's right. He's just a high school graduate and a good-for-nothing who can't do his job.
When Mike yelled loudly, Sarah, who was also in the president's office, raised an objection.
Boss, I have a report about the incorrect data distributed during the presentation.
What is it, Sarah? What do you have?
Yes, the person who created the incorrect data during the presentation was Mike. I confirmed it by checking the properties and logs of the materials used for printing, so there is no mistake. It is also confirmed that John was the one who created the correct materials that were distributed later.
What? So, you're saying that Mike was the one who lied from the beginning?
Yes, that's right.
With Sarah's testimony, Mike turned pale, and Davis added salt to the wound.
Furthermore, it seems that he paid the part-timers in our company to act as bystanders just to frame John.
Boss, what are you talking about?
Mike, flustered, tried to deny it, and Davis said with amusement,
I was also at the presentation place, so I felt something was strange. The young people who usually don't make a fuss about incorrect materials were making an unusually big fuss that day. I scolded them later for their lack of manners. At that time, I heard about John from my daughter. When she said that she heard about it, I thought something was wrong, so I asked them. Then they've easily admitted that they had received money from you and were asked to make a scene to make it seem like John was at fault.
Mike, you bastard, what the hell did you do? That means that John has been doing my work up until now. That's why her work has been slow lately.
Still, that's not true. I'm more capable than this high school graduate. But everyone, they just keep praising John. We don't need someone like him at our company. I'm the one who thinks about the company from the bottom of my heart and devotes myself to it.
It was when Mike shouted so loudly.
That's a big fat lie.
Suddenly, the door to the president's office opened, and from there, Olivia and, for some reason, Emily in a suit entered. What? Olivia and Emily? I was surprised, and Olivia, dressed as a full-fledged career woman, gave me a light wink. And the next moment, she glared at Mike.
Nice to meet you. I am Olivia Davis, Vice President of Davis Company. I was the one who was helped by John here the other day. This time, I have come to expose Mike's fraudulent dealings.
Mike is involved in fraud.
Even the president seemed surprised by this.
In this business negotiation, our representative, Christopher, was approached by your Mike for padding the bill. It was a deal where the profits would be split if it went well, and he already brought a padded invoice. The amount is $10,000 with a plan of $5,000 per person. However, he was consulting with me about what to do at the last minute. So, him serving your company, that's a big lie, isn't it?
Lies. It's a mistake or something. I don't know any guy named Christopher.
The panicked Mike retorted, and this time, Emily, still in a suit, told him off.
Oh dear, Mike and Christopher often come to our store, don't they? They were even here last night, weren't they? Look, the video of you two together is on this smartphone.
She said that and showed a video of the two of them on her smartphone.
So, all you have to do is do as I told you, and you'll get $10,000 in one go. That's a big profit, isn't it?
The video showed Mike and Christopher, with their arms around each other, in a hushed conversation. This video was so incriminating that no further evidence could be found.
I shot this video because they were talking about something so dangerous. Mike comes to our store and bothers the other customers with his overbearing attitude. And even if I tell him I don't like it, he keeps pestering me. I thought it would be a good idea to have this on hand in case trouble ever arose.
The eyes of Emily, who exposed this, were not smiling at all.
You bastard. You guys are making fun of me, aren't you? Is this high school graduate really that great? I'm an elite graduate from a famous university. Why?
Shut up. What are you saying? It's all your fault. You're the one who's fired. You're fired.
The president, his face turning red with anger, shouted at Mike. Upon hearing the commotion, a security guard arrived and restrained the loudly shouting Mike. He was then ordered to suspend himself from work at home.
So, John, what do you want to do? Do you still want to work for this company?
When asked by President Davis, I shook my head decisively. No, I don't intend to return to this company.
Why not, John? Please come back.
No, boss. At first, I thought this was a wonderful company that would give even a high school graduate like me a chance. However, with this incident, I've realized that it's not like that. I want to work in a place where I can make better use of my abilities.
That's right, isn't it? John has that value. You should excel in a new environment. And Dad, with my authority as Vice President, I want to hire John at our company. Is that okay?
Honestly, this was a godsend. I had heard about the company from her the other day and thought it sounded like an interesting company.
Oh, I was going to hire him before you told me.
Thank you, Dad. So that's why, please continue to take care of me, John.
Yes, thank you very much. And so, I ended up working for Davis Company, which has branches all over the world. I am now in charge of the import department and import various items from overseas. I have a family relationship with Olivia, and her son Michael, who was born at that time, is already good friends with me. Since then, Mike has been fired, and the 5 billion yen deal has been canceled. As a replacement, the cosmetics that were supposed to be purchased from the previous company are now imported by me from overseas at a low cost. For Davis Company, it has not been a loss, but a profit of 10 billions, and Vice President Davis is in a very good mood. As for me, I have also become acquainted with Emily in places other than her bar. But to be honest, she is on my case. Today, too, had 4 seasons. I enjoy delicious dishes she has prepared while savoring fine wine. It's my blissful time. And recently, there is another woman who has become a regular customer at this store. That is the woman who is now guzzling champagne in front of me, Sarah, a former coworker.
Oh, I finally transferred to Davis Company and was thinking of getting closer to John, but I was a step too late. I'm so frustrated.
Yes, she followed me to Davis Company. From a woman's perspective, she has a reputation for procurement, and now she has become a respectable buyer.
But it makes sense that I can't possibly compete with you, Emily. I'll work hard to become a wonderful woman like you and find an even more wonderful man than John someday.
Oh, Sarah, I think you're wonderful just the way you are.
Thank you very much. Well then, another glass of the recommended champagne.
Hey, you drank too much already. As I was chiding Sarah for saying so, Emily laughed and held out a small plate of fried chicken in front of me. While eating it, I praised the food once again. "Your cooking, Emily, it's really all my favorite, or rather, it's nostalgic."
Is that so? I'm glad you like it. But isn't it natural for you to like my cooking, John?
Huh, why?
Hey, after all this time together, you still can't remember, Johnny?
Huh, that nickname. Are you, M?
That's right. I'm Em, or rather, Emily Parker.
I see. You've become so beautiful that I didn't recognize you at all. She used to come to my mother's children's cafeteria every night when I was a child. So, how is my little brother, Jin, doing now?
Oh, come on, Johnny. You meet him often, don't you? He's our chef, Jin.
Huh, that Jin with the stern buzz cut.
That's right. Johnny must be surprised, right? The scrawny guy has turned into a muscular gorilla. There's no trace of his old self. But it's all thanks to your mom that we've come this far. Our mom's cooking is just like your mom's, Johnny. We're really grateful for that.
Is that so? No wonder your meals, M, always have that nostalgic taste.
For us, rice is linked to happiness. When we were hungry, we felt really sad and didn't feel like doing anything. But when we ate a full meal at the children's cafeteria, we became happy and slept well at night. Jin said the same thing. So, Johnny's mom was the one who gave us happiness. After my mother passed away and I was taken in by my grandparents, I could finally eat properly, but I always remembered the meals here. I wanted to become someone who could make such a kind and delicious meal someday, so I worked hard.
Yeah, now you can make that taste perfectly, right? M's cooking is really delicious.
I'm glad. Someday, I want to save up money and start a children's cafeteria too.
That's right. Your dream will definitely come true. In the past, it was a children's cafeteria that relied on donations, but now even major convenience store chains have entered the children's cafeteria scene. Leftover lunch boxes and snacks that were supposed to be disposed of. There are many children who consider themselves happy just by having those fill their stomachs. However, a warm meal prepared with care can also warm a person's heart. She wants to create such a warm children's cafeteria. I know how challenging it can be, so I want to help her in any way I can. For that, I hope to find a way to source affordable ingredients from overseas someday. It's a mysterious bond created by warm meals. It's also a bond that my mother established with her generous meddling and warm smile. I truly want to cherish this important bond forever. It's finally the final interview. However, the interviewer in charge tore up my resume right in front of me, saying, "Who would hire such a bottom-tier ex-janitor?"
If there's someone willing to hire a bottom tire like you, please let me know. I'll call them here.
But this interviewer still doesn't know. Understood. I'll call them then.
What?
Mom, can you come to the interview venue? The interviewer is calling. My parents, who they are. My name is Max Johnson. I'm a 24-year-old part-time worker who works as a janitor during the day while attending night classes at college. I'm not exactly poor, but when I was 20, my parents divorced, saying they wanted to pursue their passions without being tied down by a family. Since then, it's been just me and my dad. Even though my dad has had many business trips, even now he travels around the world. Thanks to their amicable divorce, my parents are still on good terms, and I know they will stay in touch. I also have a good relationship with my mother, even though we don't live together. The reason I've been working as a part-time worker without a regular job until this age is that I had a strong desire to travel not only in this country, but all around the world. My father has been working a job that involves traveling abroad since a long time ago, which naturally sparked my interest in foreign countries from a young age. There are still so many things I don't know about the world. It's something I can never truly understand just by watching TV, reading magazines, or browsing the internet. I want to go there in person. I want to see it with my own eyes and feel it with my own skin. With that in mind, during my high school years, I used my long vacations to visit my father's location and explore various tourist attractions, and even some off-the-beaten-path places. During that time, I got hooked on traveling abroad, and right after high school, I accompanied my father on his overseas business trips. I also started remote work during that time. When I returned to my country, I took up a job as a janitor while traveling within the country during my days off. It's gotten to the point where it's harder to find places I haven't been to than places I have. I'm grateful to my parents for giving me experiences that I couldn't have had anywhere else. And I'm still working as a part-time worker to this day. One day, when I told my mother, "I think there's no place where I've never been in this country anymore," she suggested, "Well, maybe it's time to try being a full-time worker." It's true that I've traveled all around the world, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I've conquered the US as well. Most people of my generation have regular jobs and are working, and I've also been thinking about becoming an office worker eventually. So it seemed like good timing. However, with no real work experience and not even being able to fill out a proper resume, I wondered if there was any company that would hire me. While I was thinking about this, my mother introduced me to a certain trading company, and I ended up having an interview. They had already hired me as a remote worker, so the interview was more of a formality for converting me into a regular worker. Although I had been working as a part-time worker, it was my first time setting foot in this company, and I was a bit nervous. It was an interview for a well-respected major corporation that everyone admires, so even if it was just a formality, I felt a sense of tension. I've been introduced by my mom, so I shouldn't get too complacent. I quietly motivated myself as I walked into the venue. When I was called in and entered the room, there were 3 interviewers sitting across a long table. There was an elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and a petite woman.
Please have a seat.
Thank you. I took a seat on a pipe chair, and the 3 of them introduced themselves in order as Brown, Garcia, and Miller. After shaking hands and saying, "Nice to meet you," we began with the formal self-introductions. When it was over, the atmosphere changed drastically.
Well, your highest level of education is high school, and you're now working as a part-time worker.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Johnson, didn't you go to college?
After graduating from high school, I went to live with my father overseas, so I didn't pursue further education and instead got part-time jobs.
I see. It says part-time work here too. Was it all remote work then?
Yes, that's correct. I didn't work outside. I received work orders from your company and completed them from home.
I see.
It was tense, and Brown and Garcia exchanged glances, forcing smiles and sighing.
What kind of work did you do remotely?
Yes, I mainly did translation work for data written in foreign languages.
Translation. Huh? Well, your father actually works overseas, and they say translation apps have improved quite a bit now.
What?
Oh, never mind. I was talking about something else.
What did she just say? Don't mean to brag, but I've received high praise for my performance as a part-time worker, and I've been entrusted with one job after another. But they think I use a translation app. Do they think my father does the translation for me? Am I being misunderstood?
3 years of remote part-time work overseas, and 3 years since returning to this country. It's been all remote work, right? Have you ever worked in the office?
No, I haven't. I originally worked remotely, so there was no need to come to the office.
So, is it that a shut-in has finally decided to enter society?
For a moment, I didn't understand what they were saying.
Well, that's right. I mean, 6 years of remote part-time work is not much different from being a shut-in.
That's right, and that part-time job seems quite suspicious. Translation work can now be done by machines to some extent. Maybe you only worked a few hours a week.
Brown and Garcia ridiculed me, making fun of me together.
Besides, he also has a job as a janitor in this country. That's quite a low-level job, isn't it?
Indeed. It's the perfect job for a shut-in. A decent person wouldn't do such work.
They pointed at my resume, laughed, looked at my face, and smirked at each other. Well, it's true that I've only done remote work other than being a janitor, but I have extensive experience living abroad, and I'm confident in my language skills. I handle all the translation work myself.
Speaking of experience living abroad, you're just a shut-in. Even if you're confident in your language skills, well, there are students around who have studied abroad and speak fluently. That alone isn't enough.
Their condescending attitude was getting to me, and my head was starting to hurt. The other petite woman, Miller, seemed to be focused on taking notes and didn't stop them or react in any way. What's going on? Wasn't this supposed to be a formality one? I was desperately trying to endure my anger.
Someone please tell me if they'd hire someone like this. Acting all high and mighty just because your parent had a little overseas assignment. Well, I'd love to see your parents.
You're absolutely right. Do you even know the competition ratio for our company's entrance exam? There's no way they'd reserve a spot for a bottom-tier candidate like you.
Brown said this as he playfully shook my resume, and Garcia agreed, tearing it up with enthusiasm. As I witnessed this, something inside me snapped. You want to see my parents?
Yeah, I bet you're curious. I mean, how can you even submit such a blank resume? No qualifications, no educational background. Do you take pride in your language skills? Well, that's up for debate too. I'd really like to know what kind of education you've had.
Well,
It's clear that having a single parent is a disadvantage. No matter how much overseas experience you have, you're still nothing more than a bottom feeder.
Unable to endure their conversation any longer, I said, "Excuse me, may I say something?"
What can I help you with? Are you leaving?
No way. We haven't finished the interview yet.
Ah. Facing the two mocking individuals once again, I took a deep breath before speaking. "You mentioned wanting to see my parents. Well, my mother actually works at this company. Can I call her here now?"
Well, technically, it should be the father, right? But either is fine. If it allows us to see their face, we grant permission. Please, go ahead.
"Thank you." I took out my smartphone from my bag and called my mother. Meanwhile, Brown and Garcia continued to smirk, making me feel disgusting. My mother picked up after 2 rings, and I put the call on speaker. "Mom, sorry for bothering you, but could you come to the meeting room where I'm having an interview?"
Is something wrong? I'll be right there. Just wait a moment.
As soon as they heard my mother's voice, Brown and Garcia frowned.
Wait, did you just hear that voice?
No way, right?
Ignoring the bewildered pair, Miller calmly got up and began preparing tea. And a few minutes later, as the meeting room door opened and a woman appeared, Brown and Garcia hastily stood up with surprised face.
President.
Excuse me for asking, but what are you doing here?
Hey, good job, everyone. How did the interview go?
It went smoothly.
I see. Miller, please report.
Yes.
Miller, who hadn't uttered a word until now, provided a brief report on the interview.
I see. So that's why I was called in.
What?
Max, I'm sorry for being late.
No, it's fine. As the two of us engaged in conversation, Brown and Garcia, who were comparing us, seemed to grow paler and paler.
Nice to meet you. I'm the mother of the bottom tire guy, Ava Taylor, who you two were just talking about.
Smiling at the two, my mother, in fact, is the president of this company.
You wanted to see my face, didn't you? But you two already saw it in yesterday's web conference, didn't you? Is it not enough yet?
What?
No way.
Facing the two who were gaping like fish out of water, my mother delivered the final blow.
I encouraged him to take up remote work so he could freely travel overseas because I was delighted that he developed an interest in the world.
After graduating from high school, when my mother found out that I was going to follow my father, she was delighted. She immediately arranged remote work for me, saying, "With remote work, you can do your job from anywhere in the world, so you can enjoy traveling to your heart's content. Go explore the world and broaden your horizons as much as you want." The reason I returned to this country was that my father asked me to support my mother since he was staying in China. The reason I took up the job of a janitor was that I was surprised and became interested in the cleanliness of Japanese offices when I traveled, and which was different from overseas. I wanted to know how they managed to keep the offices so clean, and it also offered relatively flexible hours, which worked out well for me.
Also, it seems like you doubt my son's language abilities, but his father is Chinese. My son is trilingual, proficient in English, Chinese, and Japanese.
Trilingual?
My son does most of the translation work for our company's reports coming from overseas branches. The report from the Chinese branch that you saw during yesterday's meeting, it was translated by my son. Are you suggesting that he used a translation app for that? Are you mocking my decision to recommend him?
Yo, we didn't mean to.
Under my mother's intimidating presence, the two of them had completely lost their words. When my mother's anger subsided a bit, Brown and Garcia, for some reason, started directing their anger towards Miller.
Did you know?
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb. You knew this guy is the president's son, didn't you?
It's hard to believe you, the president's secretary, didn't know about the boss's son.
Yes, of course, I knew him. However, I was instructed not to interfere with the president's affairs.
What did you say?
Such a conversation only further fueled my mother's anger.
At first, my intention was to make it just a formality and let you conduct a superficial interview.
Then why?
But then I noticed something strange when you two conducted the interviews. The number of candidates being hired was extremely low. When I had Miller bring the resumes from that time, I found several highly talented individuals who had been rejected. It seemed very suspicious.
Well, it's because.
That's why I'm sorry, but I had Miller join as the recorder, partly for monitoring purposes. Miller also has a voice recorder hidden on her, so I'm looking forward to listening to it later.
President, that was a rather harsh situation, so please be careful when you listen to it.
Thank you.
Wait.
President, this is…
What? Is there any problem?
Seeing the pale faces of the two when she received the voice recorder from Miller, my mother smiled.
In any case, I'll take this matter seriously. We'll discuss your punishment later. Be prepared for it. Miller, may I ask you to see off my son?
Of course.
Max, I'm sorry for not informing you and using you like this.
Well, if that's the case, you can't help it. Thanks for coming.
Oh, you don't need to thank me.
I watched my mother leave with a kind smile, and then, guided by Miller, I headed to the office entrance. When I left the room, the last image I saw of Brown and Garcia was them kneeling there, in a state of shock. 1 month later, I went through another interview which was also a formality one, and I passed successfully. I started my life as a company employee for the first time. My mother was amazed, but I wanted to understand the company from the inside, so I chose to start as a janitor. Balancing work and evening classes was challenging, but I found it enjoyable with plenty of new things to learn. When I asked my mother why she had encouraged me to become a regular employee, she said with a childlike, innocent smile, "I've always wanted you to be my successor. I thought that if I didn't act now, you might set off somewhere again soon 'cause you love traveling. I felt it was now or never." After that interview, Brown and Garcia were both dismissed from their positions due to disciplinary action. It turned out that the two of them had conspired together to reject overly talented candidates, those with single parents or undesirable educational backgrounds, and students who posed a threat to their positions in the company. They used abusive language during interviews, and even engaged in coercive interviews, which is quite rare nowadays. Furthermore, as investigations continued, it was revealed that the two of them were involved in an extramarital affair, and they had also embezzled a small amount of money. Video evidence from surveillance cameras confirmed their actions. leaving them with no room for denial. My mother expressed her regret, saying, "As the president, it's shameful that I didn't notice this wrongdoings earlier. From now on, I'll pay closer attention to each and every employee." A year has passed since I became a regular employee. By this time, my business trips under the guise of inspections had increased. My company had branches throughout the US and overseas, which allowed me to travel the world once again. The perspective of the world during business trips was entirely different from that of leisure travel, and I found it exciting and fascinating. I never expected that I would continue traveling the world even after starting my career, so I am truly grateful to my mother. My father even said, "If you ever come to China, let's have a meal together," and I'm looking forward to that as well. While conducting inspections in parallel, I continued my translation work as before. Additionally, I started providing monthly language training sessions within the company, and I was entrusted with the role of the instructor. Occasionally, I still took on cleaning duties, and since graduating from night school, I had seriously begun studying business management. This made my days even busier and more hectic, but I found them fulfilling and satisfying. Several years later, I was promoted to vice president of the company. I had risen to the level of my mother as equals. Of course, I was still far from being a seasoned business leader, and I felt that catching up with my mother was an impossible task. However, my mother smiled at the people involved and said, "Starting next year, I plan to entrust the position of president to my son." I found myself filled with trepidation every day. "Mom, becoming the president is impossible for me. I still have a lot to learn, and I don't have the trust of the employees. It's too much of a burden." I burst into the president's office, and my mother responded, feigning innocence, "Oh, is that so?"
I think it's really good thing. You gain experience of everything when you're young. Trust from the employees isn't something that increases in a day. You earn it little by little. But now isn't the time for that. You'll build it up through your work as the president.
But
everyone feels uncertain at first. I did too. But a company isn't something you run alone. When you become president, there will be times when you're unsure for a while. In those times, consult with those around you. Rely on them. Even if the results seem wrong, believe in yourself and the people around you. If you do that, you'll naturally become a good president without even realizing it.
Mom,
I'm looking forward to seeing a splendid president in you, Max.
inspired by my mother's words, I reflected on my tumultuous life so far and managed to motivate myself. When I thought about becoming the president, I realized how narrow my perspective had been due to the pressure. All right, I'll do my best in my own way.
Yes, I'm rooting for you.
It seems that from the next season, Miller will become my exclusive secretary, which is reassuring. I'll support you with all my might, so please don't worry, Miller said, and I felt a bit relieved, although I kept it a secret from my mother. After passing on the role of president to me, my mother plans to go to China. It seems my father has bought an apartment in Shanghai, and he invited her to live there together. My mother, perhaps out of embarrassment, said, I thought, why not go along with it? But when I saw her happy expression, I couldn't help but nod eagerly. After retiring as president, my mother will take on the title of chairman, but she said, I want to see the world and experience it like my son does. I plan to engrave in my memory the world that both of you found so captivating. So even if some troubles happened, please don't call me back too often. And she laughed. It seemed she envied me, as she watched me traveling around the world, reporting happily with souvenirs and photos, and wished to embark on a world tour herself someday. Looking forward to my mother's stories from her travels, I decided to send her off.
President, about tomorrow's schedule.
Yeah, sure.
Also, could you please review these documents?
Understood. Since becoming the president, I have been working tirelessly every day. However, recently, I have been feeling a certain change within myself.
President, is something bothering you?
Oh, no. It's nothing. Just get back to work.
Understood.
As Miller returned to the secretary's office, I sighed. For quite some time now, my gaze had been involuntarily following Miller. Initially, she had been a reliable support to me when I first became the president. That hadn't changed. However, a different feeling had started to grow inside me. I wasn't sure how Miller felt about it, but I believed she didn't dislike me. Or at least, I hoped so. It was a professional relationship, and I hadn't conveyed my feelings. But lately, I have been feeling frustrated about it. One day, my mother suddenly returned and visited the company.
Max, long time no see.
Mom, what brings you here all of a sudden?
Well, you know, your father said he's on a business trip to the US, so I decided to come along.
I see. So, Dad isn't here today.
Yes, he is. How about the three of us have a meal together?
Sure. As I engaged in a lively conversation with my enthusiastic mother, Miller, who had prepared tea, entered from behind.
Please have a seat here.
Oh, Miller, thank you.
Not at all. There are no urgent matters for now, President, so please take your time.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miller served tea for me and my mother, and then smiled kindly before returning to the secretary's office. Observing us, my mother's expression loosened into a sly smile.
Hey, is there something going on between you and Miller? When did that happen?
Well, it's not really like that.
Even if you say that with such a bright red face, it's not very convincing.
For some reason, my mother seemed to have noticed.
Miller doesn't seem entirely uninterested either. It's fine.
What? She nodded, and then clapped her hands together and approached me.
It's fine. You two look great together. I'd be so happy if you both got together.
No, I mean...
Just let me talk to her for a bit.
Mom, my mother headed towards the secretary's office, bringing Miller along.
Do you have someone special? What do you think about Max?
Huh? What are you?
Don't hold back. I think of you as my own daughter. I'd be overjoyed if you two got together.
Sorry. My mother is just going off on her own. Despite my immediate apology, Miller also blushed as she looked at me. Though she could refuse, said, "Give me some time."
Understood. Max, do your best.
It's really enough already, so please stop. I sighed in frustration at my mother's interference. but my heart raced because Miller didn't refuse. Perhaps there's hope for me too. Thinking that, I became even more aware of it and felt flustered. I wonder if Miller felt something similar. The awkward atmosphere was frustrating, and a few days later, I confessed and we started dating. Of course, we are in a romantic relationship, but also president and exclusive secretary at the same time. Mixing business with personal matters wouldn't be good. So we separated work and personal life in our minds, and not much progress had been made. However, we went on dates and traveled together on our days off. It turned out that Miller had experience traveling abroad, and travel was a shared hobby. We looked forward to the time we spent together, thinking about where to go next on our days off more than anything else, and I wanted to be with her all the time. Miller,
President, what's wrong?
well, today is your birthday, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. But
One day, after work, I nervously called her and took out a small box.
what is this?
Seeing the box, she seemed to understand what was about to be said and swallowed hard, tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at me. Though my heart felt like it might burst from nervousness, I took a deep breath and spoke. I'm still immature, but I promise to make you happy. Would you marry me? As I presented the large diamond ring inside, she gently enveloped it with both her hands and said, "Yes, of course." I felt relieved and started to cry.
Why are you crying, Max?
Because I'm just so relieved. Thank you. And so, we officially became engaged. We decided to get married within the year and hold our wedding ceremony overseas next year. With our busy jobs, and now as an engaged couple, we couldn't travel around the world like we used to. But we found even greater happiness and fulfillment. Gazed at a photo of themselves, smiling on a postcard sent by my parents. Although they hadn't remarried, seeing my parents enjoying their retirement years together freely and lovingly made me think, we want to become a couple like them. With that goal in mind, we will continue to work hard together.
Your tie is so tacky. Your wife has poor taste in ties.
I wore the tie my wife gave me to attend the alumni reunion. My classmate made fun of my tie, but he soon regretted it. You're in trouble.
Huh? What?
My name is Sam Howard. I'm 31 years old and work for a clothing company. I learned how to make clothes when I entered high school. I learned hard every day with the goal of becoming a designer in the future. Thanks to my efforts, I was able to join a clothing-related company after graduation. I lived my life working hard with the dream of starting my own clothing brand someday. Honestly, and hard works pay off eventually. Dreams can always come true. I was pursuing such naive thoughts while dedicating myself to my work. But this industry was not that simple.
No, this won't do. Our company is looking for innovative designs that stand out from the rest. Your work is too ordinary. There's no spark. Even a grade schooler could easily draw such a design.
Those words were the harsh truth I heard when I first came to this company. The designer at our company, who saw my sketches, was a famous designer even within our company. We often worked together, and our relationship was good. I knew his straightforward and no-nonsense personality would lead to tough opinions, but I still wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to know how my designs would be evaluated by someone with exceptional skills. That is all about me. In this world, only a handful of designers can make it big. The vast majority either work on clothing production while employed by a company or give up on their dreams and work for other companies. I realized how tough this industry was after joining the company. I was one of the many who joined the company, and I worked hard to become a top designer, but an ordinary person cannot compete with a genius, and I gave up on my dream. Now, I am involved in the production work that brings to life the creations of those geniuses.
Sam, I'm thinking of working on this collar part next, but I'm a little worried that this sewing method won't do justice to the embroidery here.
Indeed, let's try changing it to a felling stitch and finishing a prototype. I'll explain to the higher-ups on my end. Being able to work in the industry I had admired was a good thing, but lately, I felt a bit regretful. Did I really aim to become a designer with such a light-hearted attitude, giving up on the dream I had worked so hard for? Every day, I kept asking myself these questions. I didn't expect my work to be accepted, but I continued to design clothes as a hobby, hoping that someday I could create the clothes I loved. A turning point came in my life when I received an invitation to a middle school reunion from a friend. Honestly, I hesitated momentarily about whether to go, but meeting old friends and sharing a drink with them might help clear my troubled mind. With that in mind, I decided to attend the reunion. However, I couldn't imagine that my life would change so dramatically because of this reunion. When I attended the reunion, I was delighted to see familiar faces. The reunion with old friends after such a long time was filled with endless conversations as we caught up with each other. Some of them even brought their children along to the event. Everyone seemed to be enjoying their lives, and I watched over them with a sense of relief.
Wow, it's Sam. You're still wearing tacky clothes as usual.
The person I had been worried about attending the reunion had come to disrupt the enjoyable atmosphere of the party by making fun of me from behind. His name is Mark Sanders. His family owned a long-established boutique, and Mark was the only son. He currently worked for a major clothing company and was in charge of the design department there. He had always had a strong sense of fashion, earning him the nickname Fashion King in our class. It was a nickname given to him for his arrogance and great sense of style. He knew that he was being called by that nickname, but it seemed that he didn't care whether it was meant sarcastically or not. He even promoted that title himself. For someone so full of confidence like him, such sarcasm was not a big deal for him. I had heard that he had entered the same industry as me. I was certain that he would target me and make fun of me at the reunion. That's why I had been hesitating to attend. And sure enough, my premonition came true. I couldn't help but let out a deep sigh at his condescending attitude. "You are still talkative as always. It's been a while since you spoke, and that's what you say." He had always stood out for his lack of common sense, and even as an adult, he found amusement in his insolence. I couldn't help but pity him at this point. Mark and I had a history of rivalry since my school days. It seems that this grudge started because the girl he had a crush on at the time had feelings for me, but I had nothing to do with it. But I didn't care about such things. It was just annoying that someone else's infatuation with me caused trouble. When Mark learned that I was pursuing a career as a designer, he seemed to take it as a challenge to show the difference between an ordinary person and a genius on the path of a designer. Now, he had risen to the status of a popular fashion designer to the extent that the fashion industry in the States paid attention to him. Even at this reunion, Mark, the popular guy, was always surrounded by women and asked for autographs. When he came over to me, he was surrounded by several women and had a proud look on his face.
What's wrong? Huh? Jealousy from a guy with a lower income than me? You just look even more pathetic.
He was as obnoxious as ever, and it made me feel sick. I wondered what was good about him with such a terrible personality, despite his apparent talent. It seemed that even the women around him were disgusted by his attitude, as it showed on their faces. Several of my friends teased me, saying that it's written all over your face, and I realized how fed up I was with the situation. Despite his terrible personality, it seemed that the women around him were only interested in his money, and there was no sign that they cared about anything else. I couldn't help but mutter in my mind about these money-hungry people while waiting for the storm to pass. But then, my friends who were dining at another table extended a helping hand and beckoned me over. Sorry, but I don't want to waste my time talking to you. See ya. With those words, I left Mark and his entourage, prompting a chorus of boos from the women who were with him. I noticed people whispering and muttering negative comments about me under their breath on the edge of my field of vision. However, I paid no attention to such things and headed towards my friends. Regardless of the insults or mean-spiritedness, dealing with Mark was the worst. It was still better to be talked about behind my back. With these thoughts in mind, as I approached my friends who had extended a helping hand, they expressed their concern. They pointed out Mark's obsession with me. His hostile attitude was so intense that people around us were also talking about it. I expressed my gratitude to my friends for helping me, and we enjoyed drinks together again. But time passed quickly. As the first round of the gathering ended, the organizer was confirming the attendees for the second round. During a break, while taking a smoke in the smoking area, my buddy Tom from junior high school approached me.
It was a disaster, dealing with Mark like that.
Yay, seriously. I've always wondered why he's had it out for me.
He's jealous of your talent, probably. He's been conscious of you for a long time, one way or another.
Huh? He's the one overflowing with talent. I'm just an ordinary worker.
People around you just haven't realized it yet. Your greatness.
While uttering these cryptic words, Tom lit a cigarette. At that time, I couldn't understand the meaning what he said. When I tried to delve deeper into what he meant, Tom suddenly looked surprised as he stared at my tie.
Have you changed your fashion sense or something?
Huh? While I was puzzled, he took my tie in his hand and examined it closely.
You didn't used to wear something like this, didn't you?
You really pay close attention to people? Huh? Actually, this is.
What's with that tacky tie? Your taste has certainly changed.
I was about to answer Tom's question. Mark suddenly appeared out of nowhere and started making fun of my tie. I wondered why he had come out of nowhere and was getting annoyed with him. Then Tom intervened to protect me.
Hey, what's your deal? Just showing up out of nowhere.
Tom was over 6 feet tall, and his imposing presence was quite intimidating. Mark, feeling like a deer in headlight, shrunk back. However, he had his pride in front of the entourage that had come with him. He couldn't afford to lose, so he quickly retorted, looking up at Tom.
What's wrong with calling something tacky when it's tacky? I was just expressing my opinion.
Why do you even need to say something like that?
I'm just trying to help you out. People without talent and taste will always be out of touch with fashion. Fixing your tacky sense is a good thing, you know. You're just garbage at the bottom, no matter what you do.
Mark grinned at me while letting out a crude laughter, looking directly at me. Tom, looking utterly shocked and doubting Mark's sincerity, took a step closer to me, distancing himself from Mark, and expressed contempt for him. Tom probably didn't want to deal with Mark any further either. He extinguished his cigarette in the ashtray he held and left some words with a mocking smile behind.
If this tie looks bad to you, you're just a mediocre guy.
What do you mean?
Mark showed a puzzled expression at Tom's cryptic remark. Ignoring him, Tom turned to me and signaled that he was going back to the others.
I need to talk to those guys for a bit. You should go back to instead of dealing with this idiot.
Tom had only told me that because he must have known that I didn't want to be harassed by Mark and left me behind and returned to the group of friends, leaving only me, Mark, and his entourage at the scene. There were a few people passing through the lobby, but no one paid any attention to us. I didn't want to spend any more awkward time here. Thinking that, I quickly extinguished my cigarette and was about to return to the venue to catch up with Tom. However, Mark noticed my actions and started to provoke my emotions with an inappropriate comment.
You can't even express your own opinion. Ho, you're as weak-willed as ever. That's why you can't create decent designs.
As I heard those words, unpleasant memories from junior high school came flooding back to my mind. Back then, I had dreamed to join a company of the brand I loved and someday sell clothes I designed. I wanted to succeed as a designer and make life easier for my hard-working parents. They often argued over money in our not-so-wealthy household. Even as a child, I wanted to help in any way I could, so I diligently practiced drawing and came up with design ideas every day. I did this even during school breaks, and one day, Mark happened to see my drawings. Mark had an exceptional sense of aesthetics, was highly regarded by everyone for his skills, and everyone praised him as a genius. It was because of him that I became self-conscious about my drawings, which he saw and ridiculed. This drama resurfaced in my mind due to Mark's words, and I began to feel more uncomfortable.
You're such a hopeless loser, just by wearing such an unimpressive tie. It's pretty obvious, though.
As he tried to touch my tie, I swatted his hand away and quickly distanced myself from him. Mark, with a clearly sour mood, stared at me with a suspicious expression, as if wondering why I had reacted that way, and tried to close the distance between us. However, I didn't waver in the face of his glare, and I firmly held onto my tie, putting an end to his taunting words. "This is something precious that someone special made for me. You have no right to say anything about it." When he heard those words, Mark seemed momentarily surprised by my reaction, but then he quickly wore a knowing smile, deliberately provoking my emotions.
I see. That explains why it's so tacky.
"Did you say that again?"
You did marry a designer's wife, right? I heard it through the grapevine.
He probably deduced that the person I mentioned as someone precious was my wife. Despite his earlier indifference, Mark began to show a clear attitude change as he realized that this was my weak point. He continued with his words.
Anyway, she is probably just pretending to be a designer at some small to medium company, right? Your designs are mediocre, the colors don't match the suits, and most importantly, this tie doesn't suit you at all.
Mark's entourage in the background laughed while making fun of me and my tie. And then he got carried away and uttered words that he should never have said, hurting something dear to me.
Your tie is so tacky. Just like your wife's sense of style too. Both of you have fatally bad taste. In a way, you two make a perfect couple.
He said, trying to provoke a reaction from me. He wore a smug expression as if he were anticipating my response. His entourage watched with amusement, clearly expecting an interesting turn of events. However, I paid no attention to them. Instead, noticing someone behind them, I placed my hand on my forehead and let out a sigh. "You're in big trouble."
What?
His smile fading as he glared at me, clearly baffled by my words. I pointed my finger towards the person behind him, as if trying to convey the meaning of my words to him. Mark noticed this and slowly turned around to check the meaning of my words. It was at that moment his gaze shifted to the back that something happened.
Sierra Nolan.
There, standing before us, was none other than the world-famous designer, Sierra Nolan. She was a prominent figure in the fashion industry in Paris and rarely made public appearances. However, due to her occasional media exposure, anyone in the industry knew about this globally renowned celebrity. Beside her stood Tom, who had been with me earlier, and they both approached with a pleasant smile.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Mark. I've heard quite a bit about you from my husband.
Sierra said with a refreshing smile, gradually closing the distance between us. Mark, clearly perplexed by the situation and not understanding what was happening, stammered.
About me?
Yes. How you've been making fun of my husband since your school days.
Sierra, with her towering height, easily exceeding 6 feet thanks to her heels, loomed over Mark, who shrank back in intimidation.
I'm sorry for leaving you alone.
Then, quietly approaching me from behind Sierra, Tom apologized for inadvertently abandoning me.
Sierra had been in touch with me. She told me that if you were attending the middle school reunion, you should contact her if anything happened. She said she would come to pick you up immediately.
In truth, he worked in the same fashion industry as Sierra, just like me, and had some professional connections with her. Knowing that Tom had been a friend with me, Sierra remembered that I had previously mentioned Mark and decided to inform him, just to be sure. Understanding the reason for Sierra's arrival, I observed the situation, contemplating how to handle it.
What? That's just absurd.
Just what, exactly? You've been speaking as if you suddenly developed a keen sense of fashion when it comes to the tie I had him wear.
Sierra interrupted, peering into Mark's face, and he realized that his wrongdoings had been exposed, including the fact that he had been eavesdropping on our conversation. Most importantly, he understood that this situation was extremely unfavorable for him and staggered backward, trembling.
No, it's just that.
Are you suggesting that my design tie is tacky? Maybe your eyes aren't quite right?
Upon hearing those words, Mark looked surprised as he lifted his trembling face, alternating between gazing at me and Sierra. Just as she had mentioned, this custom-made tie was a gift from Sierra to celebrate something, and the entire suit itself was a present from her. Sierra had put immense effort into every detail of this suit, thinking of me, and Mark had ignorantly ridiculed it without knowing it was crafted by the globally renowned designer herself. Mocking a globally renowned designer's work with the tone of someone who just learned about it was nothing short of embarrassing. There's nothing more embarrassing than ignorance itself. It was as if he was exposing his own ignorance. Seeing Mark in this state, his entourage began to distance themselves from him, visibly disconcerted and casting disapproving glances. Faced with the reality of the situation, Mark couldn't find any words to utter and could only open and close his mouth like a goldfish, unable to articulate anything.
I do not know how remarkable of a designer you are, but I won't tolerate you belittling the things and people I hold dear. Thinking you're inferior to the man I admire? Please, stop making such misunderstandings. I'll be more than happy to introduce you to the person you've been belittling.
As she spoke, Sierra pulled out a document, and to our surprise, it contained the handwritten signature of a famous Hollywood star. When Mark saw this, he looked at me with confusion, and I too was visibly shaken.
This document is a commitment from an actor who saw Sam's designs and wants to collaborate with him. Even a famous celebrity like him was impressed by his unique designs. Do you understand? You couldn't create something like this.
Upon hearing Sierra's words, Mark seemed to think it was a lie as he took the document from her and began reading its contents. Ignoring his reaction, Sierra turned to me and gave me a gentle smile and said congratulations.
It's time for your hard work to be recognized.
Could it be the design offering mentioned there?
Yes, that's right. I showed him some of the designs you've been sending me tirelessly, even when you were working abroad.
I had been sending my designs to Sierra for advice while she was actively working overseas. Despite her greater success in the field, Sierra consistently praised my designs, and her words as my common-law wife were the greatest source of encouragement for me.
Never give up because the time for your recognition will surely come. Keep creating your designs. I promise to make your dreams come true.
It was because of her words that I never completely gave up on being a designer.
His fashion designs have a unique sense that can be felt. He wasn't the only one who supported his work. My colleagues in the industry are also eager to work with him in Paris. They've even created openings for him.
Sierra said, wrapping her arm around mine with a dreamy expression, proudly mentioning it to Mark. To succeed as a designer in the fashion capital of Paris meant possessing an aesthetic sense recognized by everyone. For Mark, who understood the significance of this, there couldn't have been a more humiliating situation. Somewhere along the way, he had become envious of me, a designer who had surpassed him and had desperately tried to undermine me.
That's just a coincidence, right? Besides, those sketches might not even be your work. You probably had her do them and then pitch them. There's no proof that any of the designs you claim to have created are yours.
Mark resorted to baseless accusations, even leaving his entourage visibly disgusted. His resentful words, full of jealousy, had Sierra and everyone else at a loss for words. They were utterly dumbfounded by his malicious pettiness. Seeing Sierra's reaction, I sighed and turned to Mark, delivering the final blow with my words. If it's about the sketches, they're still on my PC, and if you want, we can even call him right now to confirm. The chances of him colluding with us without knowing the circumstances are low. If he acknowledges the contents of that contract, wouldn't that be solid evidence? I said, flashing my phone as Mark seemed to be at a loss for words, or perhaps too flustered to respond. He must have realized that he had no comeback to that. He hung his head, seemingly defeated. You've always looked down on me and acted so arrogantly, which is probably why you never grew as a person. Your talent was undeniable. I may have disliked you, but I recognized your abilities through the work you created. That's why it's such a shame. If you had a better personality, perhaps we could have interacted differently. Upon hearing those words, Mark seemed to finally grasp the extent of his mistakes and collapsed to the floor, tears flowing without any attempt to hide them. Thanks to Sierra, I managed to get back at Mark and left this country with a clear and cheerful mind. The suit she had given me was intended as a surprise gift, and she had kept the story about the contract a secret, planning to reveal it once we arrived in Paris. I had no idea what the celebration was about, though it was mentioned that it was a celebratory gift, and it wasn't until after that alumni reunion that I was informed of the truth. And suddenly everything fell into place, leaving me with a feeling of clarity and relief. After that, I got a job as a designer at a major fashion brand in Paris, which Sierra runs. Colleagues who used to ridicule me in my previous company were left grimacing when they found out about this. As for Mark, he had become a laughing stock in front of our former classmates, and his dignity had been stripped away, and it turned out that a colleague from the same company had attended the reunion and spread the story as gossip. He was living with a tarnished reputation at the company with his new nickname, Personality Disaster, and no one felt any sympathy for him. Sierra and I, on the other hand, were featured in Parisian magazines as a famous designer couple. Despite her initial reluctance to step into the spotlight, Sierra, who had a tall stature, now balanced her roles as a model and designer. She had a change of heart and expressed her desire to design clothes for herself, eventually endorsing her in the modeling world. Somehow, she turned out to be a good fit for it, and now she manages both modeling and her business, working together hand in hand with me. Grateful for the opportunity to work in my dream job alongside the person I love, we continue to pour our hearts into our work.
Unfortunately, we are fully booked today. Only a suite room is available, but even at a discounted rate for you all.
The young hostess staring at us from head to toe and said this to us with a sarcastic smile. It's clearly she is looking down on us. Then an older man appeared from the back. When I looked up, my wife, Carla, looked anxious. I want to say something, but words are hard to come by in times like these. I've been thinking a bit. I resorted to saying something quite ordinary. Carla, are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine. It's not like I'm the one who's sick.
She looks tired beside hospital bed. She was talking like a child, putting up a brave front. I couldn't bear to see my wife like this and turned my attention to my father-in-law lying in the bed. Just a few hours ago, we received a call that Tom Sullivan fainted due to an illness. It seems his long-standing illness had worsened. Neither my wife nor I were informed about his illness, so it hit us pretty hard. Also, according to the doctor in charge, any treatment will likely not cure him completely. He has been informed of this and understands his condition. So, all we can do for my father-in-law is to watch over him while he receives treatment in his hospital bed. If we had kids, they could have offered some encouragement, I muttered. My wife quietly nodded. We don't have children. I'm already 40 and Carly is 35, so having children now seems challenging. And even if we had kids, we probably couldn't show them to my father-in-law. His condition had deteriorated to that extent. Still, seeing my wife looks depressed, I couldn't stop thinking about if we had a child. Several months later, since the day when I rushed to my father-in-law's hospital room, he passed away. I managed to accept it because he was ill, but what about my wife? He was her beloved father. It can't be easy for her. That was the only thing I was concerned about. I handled various arrangements and paperwork for my late father-in-law on behalf of my grieving wife. I managed everything necessary, including the documents, wake, funeral arrangements, and contacting financial institutions. I needed to inform various parties about his passing, but I left this task to his colleagues. That's because he was a well-known consultant in his industry. I knew he was famous as a consultant for the hospitality industry, but I didn't know the specifics of his relations. He apparently appeared on TV and in magazines, so do I need to contact those places as well? Ultimately, unsure, I decided to ask someone to handle such communications. What I focused most was staying by my wife's side as much as possible. I don't know if I could make Carla feel better even a bit. Nevertheless, I stayed by her side without saying anything. Eventually, the funeral preparations were complete, and many people gathered at the funeral home. First to arrive were our relatives. After them, my father-in-law's neighbors came. I thanked them and listened to their memories of my late father-in-law. Eventually, a couple who run a diner in the neighborhood showed up.
He really helped us out. He was genuinely a good man.
The wife began to reminisce with her warm, narrowed eyes. Listening closely to the stories, it seems that my late father-in-law had given various advice about customer service and interior decoration to the diner's owners. Moreover, it's surprising to hear that, initially, he would offer advice every time he went there to eat without owners asked for advice. He is a professional consultant, but offering advice for free for them. Can you believe such a good deal? Apparently, the diner's couple were skeptical at first, too. However, I think that's one of his good points. Since he was giving advice so passionately, they reluctantly decided to make changes to the customer service and decoration as he suggested. Unbelievably, after it, in the blink of an eye, the diner began to thrive. After that, one after another, the mourners came to pay their respects. At first, it was just close acquaintances, but gradually, celebrities who appeared in various media started to show up here and there. Owners of popular Chinese restaurants, managers of famous hotels, media personnel, people from various industries came to attend. What struck me the most was that everyone attending the funeral praised my late father-in-law. After receiving guidance from Tom, their businesses immediately started flourishing. Their profits doubled. He had helped them. Each of the attendees said such things as they bowed their heads before his memorial. It seems that he liked helping people more than I thought. As I observed the attendees, I found myself feeling a renewed sense of respect for my late father-in-law. Everyone genuinely praised him, and not a single person had a bad word to say about him. I realized once again that my late father-in-law is truly a warm-hearted person. It seemed that Carla felt the same way. At first, Carla looks depressed, but eventually, she was wearing a soft smile. She fondly remembered my late father-in-law and talked about memories of him. And she getting to know aspects about him that even she hadn't known. Even though it was a funeral, there was a certain warmth in the air. By the time the funeral ended, it seemed like Carla had completely regained her spirit. So, I asked her again, "Hey, are you okay now?"
Yeah, I realized again how amazing Dad was. And many people have contacted me and given me their contact information.
I see.
Dad is my pride. I wish I had known more about him sooner.
In the end, several hundred people had attended the funeral. Of course, since he had appeared in the media, I had expected a considerable number of attendees, but this many were beyond my expectations. I felt proud to realize that such an incredible man was my father-in-law, while also being taken aback. Despite unexpected occurrences, the funeral went off without a hitch. With everything safely concluded, I felt a sense of relief. Especially, the best part was that Carla had been deeply distressed, felt proud of her father, and could look forward. Also, it seems that Carla has made many friends and acquaintances through his funeral. My late father-in-law had taken care of many people, and they gave their contact information to Carla. Now that the funeral is over, they are actually meeting and talking with her. In fact, when I come back from work, she told me with her smile, "Today, I met with the owner of the Chinese restaurant my dad used to go to and talk about how was her day." On another day, she cheerfully told me about a conversation she had on the phone with one of Dad's friends. Seeing Carla talk so brightly and cheerfully made me happy as well. I had been worried that she would continue to be depressed and shut herself in. However, those concerns were needless, and I'm sincerely relieved. Eventually, my late father-in-law's first memorial service concluded, and it was becoming quite autumnal. While watching TV on a day off, Carla suddenly said something like this.
"I've been to this hotel before."
On TV, celebrities were introducing a certain hotel. They were using commonplace words, praising the open-air bath and the fantastic view, but based on the visuals, it seemed true. However, there was one thing that piqued my interest. This hotel seems quite upscale. Why did you go there?
I went there because of my dad's work. He took me with him.
And so, my wife, bringing up talk about her father, wouldn't stop talking. She continuously shared memories about what was good about this hotel and how, even though she went with him, her father only talked about work and didn't pay much attention to her. For a while, I was agreeing and indulging in my wife's talk. Finally, when my wife paused, I asked her unexpectedly, "Hey, our anniversary is coming up. How about we go to this hotel?"
Really? I want to go.
"Yeah, it's your memorable hotel, right? It's perfect timing." Saying this, my wife was overjoyed. She was excited and delighted with my suggestion like a child. Seeing her like this, I felt it was worth suggesting, even though it's an upscale hotel. It makes me happy too. Meanwhile, my wife immediately started looking up the hotel on her smartphone. The interior seems to have changed, but apparently, some parts remain still look same in the past.
There might still be people who remember my dad.
Then you make the reservations. That way, you can talk to the people at the hotel and learn more, right?
That's true.
My wife clapped her hands in joy and started looking up more things. Since it's also our anniversary trip, I want to relax as much as possible. However, during this season, there would be many tourists aiming to see the fall foliage. Maybe we should avoid the peak foliage time, but if we waited too much, it won't feel like an anniversary trip. We want to go on a date as close as possible when it's less crowded. That day, we were excited talking about the trip. The trip was decided to be about a month from that day on a weekday. According to my wife, the weekends and holidays were already fully booked. My wife was disappointed, but it's more convenient for me. I told my wife I'll take paid vacation during the trip, so don't worry. And then, on the day of our anniversary trip, we just arrived and looking up the hotel, I stood frozen in front of it. It was beyond what I had imagined. A luxurious and splendid exterior that anyone would agree is a five-star hotel. Even the guests entering and exiting were of a different class than us. Feeling ashamed for not dressing up more for the trip. However, my wife, unfazed, was casually expressing her impressions like amazing, and as expected, it's wonderful. Soon, my hesitant self was half forced by my wife, who took my hand and said, "Come on, let's go," and brought me to the reception. The inside of the hotel was also more than I had imagined. The unprecedented splendor of the interior and the appearance of the receptionists made my expectations rise even more. If it's this luxurious at the entrance, what about the rooms? My heart was almost jumping out. In contrast, my wife, as usual, was calm and started talking to a maid at the reception. Soon, my wife called me over. "Looks she freaking out?" As I approached, my wife said,
Oh my gosh. They're saying we don't have a reservation.
What? What do you mean?" For a moment, I didn't understand what she's saying, so I asked her one more time. At the reception desk, my wife mentioned the reservation she made over the phone and told them her name. Then, the receptionist immediately checked it, but supposedly, my wife's name wasn't on the list of reservations. Afterward, suggesting there might have been an oversight, they checked again, but still, my wife's name wasn't there. My wife confidently insisted, "That can't be right." It seemed the receptionist was having a hard time. Then, my wife pulled out her smartphone and showed the screen to the receptionist.
Look, the call log is still here. Right.
Seeing this, the receptionist's facial expression changed drastically. Suddenly, they started hurrying, excusing themselves with "please excuse me for a moment," and swiftly moved to the back of the reception counter, only to return in a rush shortly after.
I'm very sorry. It seems to be our mistake.
The receptionist began explaining the reason why our reservation wasn't recorded. It seems that at this hotel, the recording of reservations made over the phone and the entering of data into the computer are handled separately. Essentially, it seems there is someone in charge of the phone and someone else handling administrative tasks. This system is in place because this hotel usually receives a lot of inquiries and reservation calls, so it's to ensure that calls from guests can get through as easily as possible. And such administrative tasks are mainly the responsibility of the young hostess. But given that she is not good at technical person, errors in computer operation aren't rare. So, the receptionist gathered and checked the discarded reservation tickets, and it seems they found the one from when my wife made a reservation. In other words, it was due to a data entry error. While we were being explained all this, a young hostess in a dress appeared from behind the reception desk. Judging by her appearance, this woman must be the aforementioned young hostess. The young hostess glanced at us and spoke to the receptionist.
What's going on?
Well, we have guests whose reservation couldn't be made due to our mistake.
Oh, I see. So the reservation didn't go through. That's problematic.
I understand her confusion, but the young hostess hasn't greeted us, nor has she introduced herself. Such behavior is rather unbecoming for the hostess of such a respectable hotel. While I was thinking this, the young hostess turned to my wife.
I am truly sorry. We are fully booked today.
But I did make a reservation. This is your mistake, right?
Yes, but as we are fully booked, there are no available rooms. Well, actually, we do have one room available.
Then, she scrutinized my wife and me from head to toe with a rolled her eyes and smirk, and continued in a rather condescending tone.
The only available room is the equivalent to the highest grade suite. There's been a mistake on our end, so we can offer it to you at a reduced price, but I still think it will be expensive for you and...
Indeed, the special room of this hotel looks expensive. But since the reservation was not made due to a mistake on the hotel's part, isn't it only fair they accommodate us there? Yet, the young hostess does nothing but smirk the entire time. In a low voice, she says things like, "I think it's absolutely impossible for the you all, and what will you do today? It seems you've come all the way. Do you want to look for reasonable hotels around here?" Speechless. Is this what they mean? I couldn't even respond. From an outsider's perspective, we indeed might look, we are not rich, being saved money for this trip. But for a high-class hotel's hostess to speak to guests like this, it's shocking, especially as I had high expectations for this hotel. Shortly, my wife whispers to me,
Dad used to say, you can surprisingly tell when guests are unfamiliar with the place. And unfamiliar guests are the same as new guests. Whether you can successfully engage such guests. She really doesn't get it.
Is that so?
Yes, normally, especially with new guests, you would respond more sympathetically in situations like this. But she doesn't seem to get it.
My wife's words carried weight. I could feel she is indeed the daughter of my father-in-law who had been a consultant in the hospitality industry. While we are having such a conversation, the receptionist seems to be advising the young hostess in a low voice, "You shouldn't talk like that." But the young hostess plays dumb. She doesn't listen to the receptionist. Eventually, the receptionist gives up and starts contacting someone on the counterphone. From this series of events, it seems the problem doesn't lie with the hotel itself. Then the young hostess asks us.
So, what will you do?
Pressed by the young hostess and with me couldn't to say anything, my wife sighs and mutters.
How we've waited patiently, and still, this poor response. You've lost everything.
At my wife's words, the young hostess frowns. Not understanding the words, let alone trying to comprehend them. At that moment, an older man appears from somewhere and approaches us. He turns to the young hostess and says,
What did you say to our guests?
No, I didn't.
The young hostess suddenly gets flustered. And she gets sweating, avoiding eye contact. The older man says, That's enough, please step back, and dismisses the young hostess. Then he bows to us.
I'm deeply sorry. I heard there was a mistake on our part.
Before he could finish, my wife quietly says, Hearing this, the old man also stares intently at my wife's face. Then, hesitantly asks my wife,
Excuse me, are you the daughter of Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, you are. Mr. Johnson, right?
Yes, I'm Johnson. It's been a while. I've been waiting for you. How have you been, Miss Sullivan?
I'm sorry. I'm married now, and my family name is David.
Saying so, my wife points to me. Then, the man called Mr. Johnson smiles warmly and corrects, I see, Mrs. David. After that, Johnson apologized to us for the young hostess's poo attitude and for the reservation not being made due to their mistake.
It was our mistake, and since you're Tom's daughter and her husband, please stay as long as you'd like, 2 or 3 nights.
He starts confirming with the receptionist about available rooms. In the meantime, not fully grasping the situation, I ask my wife about Mr. Johnson. Who is he?
Mr. Johnson is the owner of this hotel.
What?
I met Mr. Johnson a long time ago. I was a kid, but he and Dad were good friends.
Really?
I actually found out Mr. Johnson was the owner when I was looking into the hotel. So when I called to make a reservation, he happened to answer. Besides the reservation, we also indulged in many stories from the past.
Frankly, I was flabbergasted. I was surprised that my wife knew such an impressive person, and that such a person was inviting us to stay as much as we wanted just because we were his daughter and son-in-law. I respected my late father-in-law all over again. Soon, Mr. Johnson, who was talking with the receptionist, returned to us. Then, immediately after arriving in front of us, Mr. Johnson bowed deeply again.
I am very sorry, but it seems we are fully booked today. However, the special room is available. Why not stay in the special room overseen by Mr. Sullivan?
Is that okay? I booked a regular room.
It's fine. It's a great opportunity. Please follow me.
While being guided to the special room, I casually asked my wife, So, about the supervision by my father-in-law you were talking about.
Yay. Remember when we were watching TV and I told you that I've been to this hotel before? Actually, I came along when Dad was tasked with overseeing the special room.
We arrived at the special room while talking. It truly was a special room. Comparing it to another hotel, it's easy to understand why the young hostess would call it a top-tier suite. Needless to say, the interior was top-notch, and the view of the garden visible from the large glass windows the moment we entered the room was breathtaking, like looking at a photograph. From the inner room, we could go directly out to the courtyard. The room was spacious, and the atmosphere was very calming. We could stay in this room for free just because my wife is the daughter of my father-in-law. Owner Mr. Johnson was just that grateful to my father-in-law, feeling so much obligation. Initially, my wife also hesitated, but since he couldn't attend the funeral, she was finally persuaded strongly by Mr. Johnson as a last resort. After that, we enjoyed to our heart's content. We also went to the open-air bath, and we explored the courtyard. We went to the buffet-style restaurant together and thoroughly enjoyed our time as a couple. Having so much fun, the bad attitude of the young hostess quickly vanished from our minds. Time flies while spending our time in such a manner. It's checkout day. As we cleaned up our room and headed to the reception, Mr. Johnson was there waiting for us.
There's something I want to talk about. Could you please come to the drawing room?
We were led to the drawing room. Then, immediately, one of the receptionists brought us tea. After the receptionist left the drawing room, Mr. Johnson began to talk.
I am really sorry about that happened when you checked in. I never thought that such an attitude would be taken even towards Mr. Sullivan's daughter.
Please, lift your face.
As my wife interrupts, Mr. Johnson slowly lifts his face. He then began to sporadically explain the situation to us. It seems that in this hotel, Mr. Johnson's wife was originally the hostess. However, as she aged and it became physically straining, she decided to hand over her duties to a younger hostess. The new young hostess is Johnson's daughter-in-law, who initially worked as a maid at this hotel. However, she promoted from a receptionist to a young hostess seemed to have inflated her attitude. She gradually became arrogant, apparently starting to act superior even to other receptionists. Eventually, she started acting superior to guests as well, and there were often complaints from them. Recently, complaints from her fellow receptionists have also increased, and Mr. Johnson was thinking that it was about time to take measures. However, this incident seems to have affected him significantly, and not only Mr. Johnson but also his son seem to be angry. The young hostess is currently subdued and is starting her training as a hostess from scratch. Now, she's working as a background staff, doing the same tasks as new recruits, even voluntarily cleaning. Yet, hearing that she's the wife of his son makes one feel sorry for her. It may not end up in her being fired, but hearing that she's somewhat remorseful is somewhat relieving.
Putting aside the matter of the young hostess, I am truly sorry for I was not being able to attend Mr. Sullivan's funeral. It was our peak season.
It's fine. I could feel how much you haven't forgotten my father, and how much you cared for him.
My wife said this with a gentle smile. My father-in-law and Mr. Johnson met during a time when something like this occurred. It was a time when hospitality was neglected and the number of receptionists who would deal with customers earnestly was decreasing. Even when customers were drifting away and indifferent staff were increasing, only Mr. Johnson seemed to think this couldn't continue. Knowing that my father-in-law was working as a consultant at that time, Mr. Johnson immediately consulted him. Then, he learned the basics of hospitality from my father-in-law and seemed to teach them to all the receptionists and staffs. Moreover, by ensuring strict compliance, they were just beginning to regain their reputation as a luxury hotel. In the end, Mr. Johnson bowed his head many times until we left. And he kept saying, "Thank you." It must be frustrating for my wife, too, that such a loved father-in-law passed away early. When we talk about my father-in-law, there are times when she sheds tears, and I can't think otherwise. But even if one leaves this world, there are people who inherit their thoughts, and I feel their thoughts are widely permeating. My wife said that it makes her happy. Thus, a year passed, and we went to visit my father-in-law's grave. Next to her, I quietly watch my wife. Being with her makes me feel happy this much. Maybe it's because she is your daughter and has inherited your way of life. Reflecting on my days with my wife, I reported such to my father-in-law.
Ouch!
As I was heading towards the stairs after getting off the train, a scream-like sound startled me. Turning towards the noise, I saw a girl with a white cane had fallen over. An apparent middle-aged man, who seemed to have bumped into her, was just standing there looking down at her without helping.
"Damn, in the way."
The man clicked his tongue and muttered an expletive, then carelessly walked over the tactile paving and continued on his way. The girl seemed unable to get up, having fallen inside the safety line. I quickly rushed over to her. "Are you okay?" I assumed someone visually impaired might be uncomfortable being suddenly touched. So, I consciously kept a distance and spoke to her, especially since she's a young lady. Besides, the person who scared her and acted rudely was a man. It'd be really scary if a stranger whispered into your ear out of nowhere.
I'm fine."
The girl said, trying to stand up, but immediately winced and sat back down. Seems like she twisted her ankle. Just then, the sign lit up indicating the arrival of the next train. "Sorry, can you lean on my shoulder for a bit?" I offered, but she looked uncertain about what to do. "The train's coming soon. It's safer if we move back a bit. Hope it's okay if I help you by holding your arm." When I addressed her, she nodded in agreement. Helping her up, her face twisted even more with pain. There's no way she could walk on her own. "Were you planning to catch the train heading downtown from this platform earlier?" When I asked her, she explained she was heading home. "I do have some errands near this station, but I can't just leave her like this." The train was about to arrive. On the spur of the moment, I decided to accompany her home. She hesitated at first, but realizing she couldn't manage alone, she agreed. Soon, we boarded the arriving train. I figured she'd be wary about a stranger suddenly accompanying her home, so I introduced myself, told her my name's Ryan Miller, a 30-year-old working in a specialized trading company. Talking rapidly, I pulled out my smartphone and typed into the chat app that I use to communicate with my boss, "I'm really sorry. Something has come up, so I'll be late." As soon as I sent the message, my boss called me back as if he had been waiting. I can't answer the phone. I'm on a train. I ended the call unilaterally and sent another message, to which my boss immediately replied,
"I'll handle things here. Just get here as soon as possible."
I could almost feel the anger radiating from the text. I was afraid, because my boss is a dignified person, but I hoped he would understand once I explained the situation. It was all I could do to hope. Perhaps I had been too focused on typing. It seemed I had answered the girl's quiet question with an incoherent response.
"What?"
The girl raised her voice in surprise. "Oh, sorry. What were we talking about?" I looked up from my smartphone and faced the girl.
"Did you have something to attend to?"
She probably sensed people's presence more precisely because she couldn't see. Maybe she had noticed that I was a bit flustered and that something was off. The girl looked worried. I had been so preoccupied on the platform. I thought she was a young girl, but on closer inspection, she might be a high school student. That would make sense. The girl, holding a white cane, was walking alone, so she couldn't be that young. I apologized to her for worrying her and explained that I had some work-related matters, but had already informed them, so it was okay. She introduced herself as Mia Thompson and shared that she is a freshman attending a school for the visually impaired. I didn't know because I rarely use the station, but it seems to be the nearest one to her school. Today, she had committee activities and got out later than the usual dismissal time. And she isn't completely blind. She is what is generally called visually impaired. Since I, for my part, was preoccupied with my issues, worried about being late for an important matter, I didn't notice, but Mia sitting next to me is a bit shaky. It must have been a significant issue for Mia, who started commuting by train alone from high school. Such an irresponsible person. It's embarrassing as an adult, older than them, and as a man. Hoping to alleviate her fear a bit, I intentionally spoke about light topics until we reached her nearest station. I am clumsy, so I have plenty of small mistakes to talk about. Sometimes I feel pathetic, but it is good to be of help in this situation. Her tense face gradually relaxed. When we got off the train together, she called home from the platform after asking me. She was going to ask to be picked up, but unfortunately, she couldn't get through. Perhaps her family was worried about Mia, who was returning home later than usual, and went out to pick her up.
My mom is pretty scatterbrained. She might have left her cell at home and headed to the station.
Seeing Mia fidgeting shyly, I felt the adolescence from her for the first time since we met. See, I told you I'm clumsy. I do the same kind of things. Trying to console her, she showed a shy smile. I decided to give Mia a piggyback since she said her home is not more than a 15-minute walk away. We shouldn't pass by if we take a cab. I know I'm just an old man, but I shouldn't stink. I said in a purposely playful tone, and she smiled.
I'm heavy.
She seemed reluctant as I piggybacked her, but in reality, she was very light. However, an accident occurred as soon as I piggybacked her. My pants tore at the seat when I braced myself. A loud ripping noise was made, and she noticed it too, and we both laughed. We ran into her mom when we were about halfway to the house. It was a straight road, so it was nice that we didn't pass by each other. I explained to her mom, who looked surprised and dumbfounded, while still piggybacking her. Her mom thanked me and tried to take over piggybacking her, but it would be too much of a burden for a woman, no matter how light Mia is. I declared that I would carry her home, and we headed there while talking. It was my second time introducing myself. When we arrived, I slowly let Mia down at the front door, and the two of them tried to keep me from leaving.
I'll sew your pants right away.
I appreciated their kindness, but I had things to do, so I excused myself and left. I called my boss as I headed to the station, thinking he surely wouldn't be waiting any longer. "Just get here now," he yelled, and I ran to the station. Yes, today was the day of my arranged date, set up by my boss. I arrived at the station, where I met Mia again, and by the time I reached the designated restaurant, it was over an hour past our originally agreed time. While hastily fixing my disheveled hair from running frantically, I noticed my boss and a woman sitting at the table, messily fixing my disheveled hair. I am so sorry for being extremely late. I apologized as soon as I saw them. Just as the woman I was supposed to meet began to speak, a loud voice came from behind.
Since Alice said, "Let's wait a bit more," I had no choice but to wait. What's with that attire?
Fitzgerald, the father of today's matchmaking partner, Alice, it seemed he had stepped out and had just returned to witness the tear in my trousers.
Is that the appropriate dress code for a matchmaking meeting? We are being taken for granted.
Fitzgerald was furious. Before I could make any excuses, he walked past me, grabbed Alice's hand, and made her stand up.
This meeting is off with someone who can't even keep time.
He forcefully pulled the resisting Alice and left the restaurant.
What are you going to do? You trying to ruin my reputation, Ryan.
My boss glared at me and hastily followed the two. Fitzgerald's company is an important client of ours. Alice, who is the only daughter of the president, is regarded as the future president of the company. Rumor had it that, in addition to basic academic skills, she had been taught business management and imperial wisdom by her dad since she was young, and I have managed to anger such a person. My head hurts. Afterwards, no matter how much I tried to contact my boss, he neither answered the phone or responded to my messages on the chat tool. The next day, I went to the office with much trepidation, and it was like walking on pins and needles. It seems my boss has spilled the beans to everyone in the office about the broken engagement. Everyone in the workplace blamed me. In the first place, having an arranged date with the heiress of Fitzgerald Trading was out of my league. But I only went because I was relentlessly asked to. I initially declined when my boss brought up the meeting as it was a burden. However, it seemed that I was the one specifically requested by the other party. I have no professional interaction with our clients, so even my boss didn't know why it had to be me. My boss, unable to get his apology accepted by Fitzgerald, was in deep trouble and took it out on me each time. After enduring an uncomfortable week in the office, an unexpected person came to visit me. 9 days after the meeting day, Alice, Fitzgerald's daughter, visited the company. My boss and I dealt with it and led her to the reception room. There was no sign of displeasure from her.
It seems you helped Mia.
Alice said to me with a smile. Mia is the name of the visually impaired girl I helped on the day of the meeting. I hadn't explained the reason for my tardiness to Alice, so how did she know her name? While I was lost in thought and unable to speak, Alice threw more mysterious words at me.
I'm friend with her, so I asked her what happened that day.
Friends with almost a 10-year age gap. My confused face and my boss, who's more out of the loop, were explained to by Alice. Fitzgerald Trading is also committed to charitable activities, inviting students from special needs schools, care schools, and schools for the blind to performances by circus troupes and theater groups funded by the company. The employees are also active in volunteer activities, and Alice has been involved since her student days. At first, she was reluctant, seeming like a hypocrite. She met Mia during one of those activities, volunteering for a reading program at an elementary school for the blind. Alice was always aware that she was different from others due to the daughter of CEO Fitzgerald. Her friendships were largely formed due to her status, and she never had someone she could truly open her heart to. However, meeting Mia has become an opportunity for her to face herself. After she finished reading the book, Mia approached her and shared her impressions. Such a kind voice. It seemed to reflect a kind personality. She praised. Alice is often misunderstood as a strong-willed woman or highly prideful person, but she felt saved by Mia's words, who didn't judge by appearances. Listening to this, I reflected that I too had been judging her without knowing her. I thought she's high maintenance and wouldn't get along with me without knowing anything about Alice, just by her appearance and rumors. Her interaction with Mia became a catalyst, and Alice became more proactive in volunteering, participating unrelated to the company's operations. 5 days after the arranged date, She went to the regular volunteer activity at the school for the blind and heard about me from Mia, and she understood the reason for my tardiness.
She was really concerned about your clothing and talked about wanting to pay for the repairs.
Remembering the embarrassing moment when I showed Alice my torn pants, my face turned red.
I've come to apologize for my father's rudeness.
Alice said. She found out about the circumstances of that day and wanted to apologize in person, so she went out of her way to come to the office. It's understandable that your dad got angry, so please, don't worry about it. Even as I conveyed this, she shook her head and apologized once again. She began to speak.
Actually, there's another thing I want to talk about.
She started confessing with an awkward air. It turned out that, actually, Alice and I had met when she was a high school student 10 years ago. Back then, Alice was a high school senior, preparing for SAT. She generally studied in libraries, but when things weren't going well, she would study in a cafe to change her mood.
One day, someone placed a paper coaster on my table where I was constantly sighing.
I braced myself, having a feeling I knew what this was about. 10 years ago, I was a college student and worked part-time in a cafe. To summarize what she recounted, the coaster had written, "You're always studying hard. Keep it up." When she looked around, she met eyes with a staff member who was cleaning another table, and he smiled warmly at her. Although he was polite and formal during service, he seemed somewhat aloof, and this friendly demeanor apparently made her heart flutter. She even checked the name tag on his chest, and saw it said, Ryan. From that moment, Alice's one-sided love began. However, the staff quit his job 6 months later, and she couldn't see him anymore. It became a fleeting romantic memory. When my eyes met hers after she finished talking that much, my heart won't stop racing. I should remember meeting a beauty like Alice frequently for 6 months, but I don't remember at all. As if seeing through my heart, she added,
I only started caring about my appearance after I started working. I wasn't interested in fashion until I graduated. I was plain.
She, who always stands tall and dignified, shrinks shyly and mumbles in a stooped posture. Seeing her like that, I suddenly remember a regular high school girl in a uniform. Alice was extremely surprised when she saw me during a business meeting at our company. Because the cafe attendant she had a crush on appeared before her in a suit, and when her dad told her it's time to settle down and brought up an arranged date, she mentioned my name. You must have been opposed by your dad, suggesting someone more outstanding from a much larger company, right? I figured it might be hard for Alice to bring it up, so opened my mouth first. She nods with reservation.
But I opposed. It was my first defiance.
Alice smiles faintly and shares the details of her battle with her dad.
I've always been a good girl following what my dad said. I wanted to at least choose my marriage partner, so I insisted. But then it all turned out like that.
I realized that I have not only put my boss in a bad position by being late, but also ruined Alice's face. However, it must have been convenient for Fitzgerald, my tardiness. He was against it from the start, so it might have even felt lucky that he could easily find an excuse to break it off.
After hearing from Mia, I am convinced that you are exactly as I had imagined outside of work as well.
It's nice to hear that, but she might be disappointed because there's an aspect that's too embellished.
Would you like to be friends with me?
Sure, being suddenly told about a marriage meeting made me feel awkward. But of course, I welcome being friends. After that, we started participating in volunteer activities together. I met Mia again and got along well. After such days continued for several months, I had the chance to meet Mr. Fitzgerald privately.
I have heard from my daughter. I am sorry about that day.
He apologized for leaving without hearing the circumstances. On the day of the marriage meeting, it was natural to scold me for being late, and I had no grudge. But it's good that the misunderstanding was cleared up. Alice, while observing work manners, does wear makeup during work, but she basically doesn't wear any in her private time. Seeing her innocent face and personality just like when she was in high school, I am gradually being drawn to her.